Good evening. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Michelle Bartlett, and I work with Summer Sessions and Lifelong Learning, and I'm delighted that you've come tonight, sort of the christening of the summer season. This is the 15th annual Legacy Lecture. The concept of the lecture came about because Judith Weir, those of us who remember Judith Weir, used to be in charge of development for UAF, had Thomas and Jean Kirsch had contacted her about giving money to the university. They both were at Stanford. Jean actually got a biology degree here, went on to graduate school, actually med school at Stanford, and became a Jungian psychiatrist. And she wanted to come back and give a talk. And actually she did. It was interesting. But out of that grew the thought we should have a legacy lecture honoring one of our own every year, because there are many people who have come to UAF and have graduated and have gone on to make their mark not only in our community, throughout the state, throughout the country. So, 16 years ago, remember we had COVID, so the first one was Grace Scheibel, Neil Davis, Joe Usavelli Sr., Willie Hensley, Vera Alexander, Patrick O'Neill, Helen Atkinson, Karen Parr, Andrew Morello, Neil Brown, Terrence and Dermot Cole, Nancy Cook Hansen. Actually, she took 2 years because of COVID. Then Steve Frank, Mary Erlander, and tonight we get to honor one of our own, not only who graduated from UF, but went on to get an MBA here and became the first woman president of a bank in Alaska. So tonight we have the honor of hearing all about Joe Heckman. My partner in crime for this whole thing has been Robert Hannon. Whenever I come up with an idea, he usually doesn't run out the door. So he's been my partner in crime for the last 16 years, and I'm very grateful. I'm going to turn it over to Robert, who's going to introduce our honoree. Thank you.
Well, I just want to say a few words about Joe before you watch the movie, because I won't give any spoilers away. But I was lucky enough to be approached by Joe when she decided, after she retired and after she was no longer serving on the Board of Regents, she decided to do something remarkable, which was start a podcast. I mean, I don't know, she didn't know anything about podcasting, so I met with her a couple of times and I counseled her. She was remarkable. She started learning about editing her own programs, recording them, buying equipment. She invested a lot of time and energy on a subject that wasn't even on my radar, which was food scarcity and the thriving food and agricultural business in our community. So I was just in awe. And then when Michelle, so I had her on my show, Northern Soundings, and one of the bonuses on that, I want to acknowledge Steve here, is that, so we said, okay, let's try a test interview and see how that, well, she was bold enough to interview her husband, which normally I wouldn't recommend, but it was splendid. And so anyway, when Michelle approached me about doing this legacy lecture, I was so excited that we'd be able to sit down and capture it on video. So I know you're going to enjoy it. A fascinating discussion, I think, but what am I going to say? And we'll talk more after, and she'll entertain some questions from the crowd. Though I see some ringers, so we have to be careful about that. Thank you. Well, Jyotsna Heckman, thank you so much for sitting down here. And I guess maybe I'll start out right now acknowledging the space we're in, which is the BP Design Theater in the Usabelli building on the Trothuda campus. You look around a space like this, and it must be so different from when you were attending here.
It is. This is brand new, so it's not too many years old. When I was here in 75 through 79, we had the School of Business in Greening Building. It was not in Bunnell Building. Bunnell was all, I would say, administration, and then biology and chemistry and labs, and it was very different.
Yeah.
It was very different campus, and it has evolved in such a wonderful way, to where we are sitting today. This space is beautiful.
Yeah, it's very exciting to reflect on that. But let's get you back, because you originally and your family come from northern India, right?
Correct.
Yeah, Lucknow?
Lucknow.
And that's a pretty important hub in that part of India, isn't it?
Yes. Lucknow is part of North India. It's a very old, cultured city. When the Nawabs, the Mughal Empire, when they came and they occupied India, they occupied a lot of their seat was in Lucknow. And Lucknow was, as a result of their presence, Lucknow is well known for its culture, its manners, its etiquettes.
Architecture?
Its architecture, its music, its poetry, performance and art. So a very cultured city.
I know from previous conversations we've had that you came from an extended family, and so you had a large residence. And your dad was educated in both law and social sciences. Yes. And he got a Fulbright scholarship to travel. Is that what ultimately brought you to Fairbanks?
Ultimately, I would say that would have been, the seeds were sown then in his mind. He, on the Fulbright scholarship, he traveled all over the world, studying the cultures and societies of different countries. And when he came to United States, he tells us that he thought that this was the place where he wanted to raise his family and bring his family and raise his family. He was just deeply infatuated almost with the United States, and he wanted to come here. And I think that thought was in his head from then on till it became a reality in 1975 when he was able to bring all of us here.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about him because I know how influential he was on the family. And it strikes me, it's remarkable that he could have practiced as an attorney, a lawyer, but he was really engaged in the social aspect, social work, and that aspect of his education. Tell me what drove this guy.
He was just a very humble, kind-hearted, brilliant individual. But he always wanted to do something good for somebody else. And in his early career, he was dealing with developmentally disabled youth and adults. Then he was working to provide some sort of a productive work-life balance for young adults who were hearing impaired and speech impaired. So throughout his life in India, he was doing social service. The term servant leadership didn't exist till more recently. But in my mind, as I look down and back to what my dad was doing, that's exactly what he was doing. He was a servant leader back then, and he served the people that were underserved. And that was his mindset, and he did that when he came here as well.
So you say from that Fulbright, he really identified as the United States as a place to settle. How did he end up in Fairbanks? And what was the reaction to the family that you're moving to Fairbanks?
Well, he came to Boston first. He went to Boston University and was completing his education there. And this is in 1970. And quite honestly, we all thought that that's where he would settle. That's where we would all come when the time is right. But he knew how challenging it was to find a job that could support a family. And the story goes that he was looking at the cork boards where they posted pictures of jobs, the notices of jobs.
Yeah, before the internet, right?
Before the internet. And he was flipping those things, and he saw something in Fairbanks, Alaska. It was a counselor position in Fairbanks, Alaska. And he says, I've never been to Fairbanks, Alaska. Now remember, this man has traveled all over. So, he's a bit of a traveler, right? So he decides that, he's going to write to them, send his resume, and come and interview with them. They were delighted that here comes a person who's interested. And so they wrote back to him, they sent him an airplane ticket, and they said, you come and interview with us. Now, the kids, all of us always joke with him, the dad, because you were the only one who applied. Nobody else applied, so they had no choice. Oh, no, that's not the case. They like my credentials, So he came here. It was, I believe, it was either 50 or 60 below zero. It was in January when he came to interview.
Wow.
And they offered him a residential director position for Hope Center.
Oh.
And so it was more than a counselor, but he accepted. And we always asked him later that Dad was like deathly cold. What about this Fairbanks did you like? He says, it was the people. He says, the people were so great. The community was so welcoming, and they were so nice to you. Everybody took time and talked to you. He says, I knew this was a good place. And
it turned out to be that way. And as we all know, at 40 below, that's a saving grace here. Well, but what was the family's reaction when he said Fairbanks? Because you couldn't find Fairbanks on the map, could you?
Yeah. I mean, we knew the big cities in the United States, New York, Boston, San Francisco, Los Angeles. Fairbanks, we had no idea. And back then, it was before Google Earth and internet and all of that, and we had an old school atlas. And we tried desperately to find Alaska.
Not much luck.
I don't think we would ever have found Fairbanks, but we maybe could have found Alaska, and we did not. And we were pretty scared as to where is Dad and where is he taking us.
Well, the immigrant experience, even in the 20th century, wasn't easy. And so did it take a while to get green cards and the documentation together for the trip?
It did, Robert. It was, took him almost close to 5 years. So he was separated from his family for 5 years.
Wow.
He was here working, saving money, getting ready for the family to come. And a lot of that was applying for green cards for all of us. And in those times, it was not easy to get immigration visas, green cards, as you call them. So it took him some time to get that. And when everything was in place, he came to India and he says, okay, it's time.
I hear a story that you came here on the 4th of July.
July 4th.
Okay, well, what was it like? What was your experience? Because you're a 17-year-old girl. You're a teenager. Tell me about that transition.
And a tired teenager. We had a long journey to make from Lucknow to Delhi, Delhi to London to New York, New York to Seattle, Seattle to Fairbanks. And so really long trip. And our first trip, we
By
had,
air?
by air, yeah. We had, none of us had ever, Dad had, but none of us had ever been in an airplane. And, you land and it's way past midnight, and it's bright out. It's like daylight, which in itself is like, this is different, this is strange. You could hear fireworks. You couldn't see them, of course.
Right.
And my dad was so wanting to, just put the best foot forward and please us. He says, see, they're so excited, they have fireworks, going.
Because you arrived. Whoopee!
We're all like tired kids, Whatever,
right, Dad.
yeah. I don't think we could say whatever back then to our dad, or even today. But it was a very different experience for us because we have left really large, bustling cities. Certainly not like New York, shopping, theater, not that, but huge cities with a lot going on, different kind of shopping, schools, universities, movie theaters and all of that. And we land in Fairbanks, and it's very quiet. There's not a whole lot
Yes,
going on.
I'm sure compared to, yeah.
The noise level in India.
But wait a minute,
hear.
there was the Gavora Mall, so you got to see some shopping.
We did. Our first mall that my dad took us to was Gavora Mall. And back in '75, we had the grocery store in the Gavora Mall. And then we had an array of different businesses. A bank was also there. In the middle, at the end, was a hardware store. I think it was Pay and Save. So Market Basket, Pay and Save were anchor stores. And then we had all these smaller stores in the middle. At 17, it takes a lot to impress a girl. And we were like not impressed. I was not impressed. My mom loved it. My mom went to Market Basket and she just thought, this is such a great grocery store, I mean, all the produce was lined up so beautifully and all the apples were displayed so nicely, things that we're not used to in India, So, there was an organization to the place that my mom had not seen before. So she really liked it.
Okay, well, you're 17 years old. You finished high school in India, I take it. So you were ready to go to college. How did you happen to decide on UAF?
Well, I don't think it was a question of deciding for me because we had arrived here, right? We're in Fairbanks, Alaska. And my dad was the only wage earner in the family, right? And we didn't talk about it, but we knew that he didn't have the kind of money to send me to, a big Ivy League school. So we just pointed up to the hill and
Sure.
he says, there's the university and that's where you're gonna go. And so I don't think that there was a huge decision-making process there. Yeah, I was just gonna
It
go
made
there.
sense, and yeah, you had your room and board already taken care
Yeah,
of.
exactly.
What was your first impressions here as a young teenager?
Apprehension, little bit of fear of what was I doing here. University was large, huge. I didn't know anybody. I didn't have any friends. It seems like I was asking directions all the time, where do I go here and what do I do here? And I believe I was one of the 2 Indian students on campus.
Two, I was going to ask you, were there other East Indian students, and you're one of 2?
Well, and I believe was a graduate student, and I was, an incoming freshman,
Right.
undergrad student. So it's a whole new, not only a whole new country, it's a whole new, experience of starting a journey in a college.
Sure.
And so there was a whole lot of apprehension and anxiety on my part.
Sure.
When I started here.
And you were a science major to begin with, because you were going to be a doctor, remember? Yeah.
Well,
And
I thought I was supposed to be.
yeah, but fate intervened.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, when you decide to make that transition from the sciences into business, Ann Tremorello, who was the registrar here, had a hand in helping in that transition. Tell me about that, because we've interviewed Ann.
Yeah, I know. Anne's such a wonderful person, and she, I believe, is the all-time greatest registrar this university has had, and a great champion of this university. As an undergrad student, if you were going to do something different, change a major or add a class, drop a class, you went to that area that was headed by Anne. And so when I went to her and I said I want to change my major, not knowing what the process was, what was I supposed to do, I was really hoping it didn't involve my dad's signature because my dad would not
You
have
want to
done
bring
that.
it gently to him.
Yeah, he would not have liked it. So she said, well, you should try School of Business. I think it was fairly new back then. And she says, you might like it. She says, go see Howard Zach. So I went to see Dr. Howard Zach. He became my advisor. And he said, sure, you can take these classes. And I changed. And my dad didn't know any of this because, he wasn't going to call Ann. I mean, parents didn't do that,
Right.
and Ann wasn't going to call Dad, So she did ask me if my dad knew that I was changing majors, and I said, no, not yet, But I didn't tell her dad or mom till when the transcripts came, because in it there was no biology.
They might have figured something out.
Why are you taking Intro to Business? So I had to fess up and tell him, and I think he was quite upset about that. He never vocalized any of his thoughts or disappointments or anything, but he was quite upset. For a long, long time, he was very upset that I had done what I had done. But he came to accept it,
Sure. But I guess I remember you telling me you knew you'd found a home, though, when you started taking these classes. Something clicked for you. Tell me about that, Joe.
Well, with my biology major, taking chemistry and physics, it was arduous for me. Those are tough subjects, and I wasn't enjoying myself. But when I took these classes, marketing, economics, and I don't know if the professors had a lot to do with that too, and Intro to Business, I just liked what I was studying. So I felt like I had found my home, so this is where I wanted to be. I wasn't going to be one of these people who keep changing their majors.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, are there people who stand out for you in the department that made a difference, became mentors even?
I mentioned Dr. Howard Zach, who was my advisor and a great advisor. Took great interest in looking at what I was doing and how can I graduate still in 4 years, and what classes I still had to take, and what could I take to maybe get a minor. So I had a major in management, minor in economics. So he was a great advisor. Dean Phillips of the School of Business, as it was called back then, School of Management, actually. He was wonderful. Open door policy. Anybody could talk to him. I could talk to him. I didn't feel like there was this barrier in communication. Dr. Soli, who taught economics, and Dr. Fink in accounting. Just great professors.
And we've talked about this too, but other people who've attended here as undergraduates really talk about how accessible their professors were, the class sizes, and the sort of intimacy they were able to experience here at UAF that a lot of people from outside those Ivy League schools don't get.
So having had no comparables, for me, this is what I was experiencing, right? In the whole 4 years that I was in college at UAF. And I never had a problem. If there is some concern today that professors are not accessible, or, who knows, COVID maybe did that. Back then, everybody was in their offices, or there'd be a note saying, back in 5 minutes. We'd just sit and wait. I'd just sit on the ground outside in the hallway, outside the office, and wait for the professor to come, and then say, "Oh, hey, how are you? Yeah, I'm good. Want to talk? Yeah, I want to talk." And it was good. You felt well taken care of. I guess, if that's the way I can put it.
Mm-hmm.
Especially for me, who was coming from another country, another background.
Well, you graduate with these degrees and majors and minors, and you go into banking.
Yeah.
Did you ever think you wanted to go and be an entrepreneur and a business owner to begin with? What drew you to banking, do you think, Joe?
Good friend and a fellow student who went down to Anchorage to National Bank of Alaska and became a management trainee. She calls me and she says, "You should apply for this job." I'm like, okay, So I applied for the job. Get a letter in the mail from National Bank of Alaska, training director, says he's coming up and would like to meet with me. And so I told Dad, I said, this guy is coming. Who is this guy? Who's going to come meet with you? Do we know him?
Dads from the beginning of time.
Do we know him? No, we don't know him. But you're going to have to take me to Travelers Inn. Westmark was called Travelers Inn back then, So I said, you're going to have to take me, Dad, and just drop me there, and I have an interview with this guy. And that led to the guy going back, and I got an employment letter, but I had to move to Anchorage, which was another big, what do you mean you're moving?
How did that play out in your family?
Oh,
it must have been, yeah.
It's kind of like one, one mountain after another. What do you mean you're moving to Anchorage? We don't know anybody in Anchorage. Who you're going to live with? And, oh my gosh, I don't know. And so, so much went on because this was all new to us.
Sure.
It's all new to our family. Nobody's ever done anything like that before. And so I didn't choose banking. I didn't choose anything. I just wanted a job and to utilize my college degree and do what the rest of my friends were doing. And I was fortunate enough that I got this opportunity to work as a management trainee in the bank in Anchorage, and kind of sort of like School of Management, I found my home.
Yeah, well, and it was a remarkable training program, wasn't it?
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. They had a group that they started, like maybe 15 to 20 management trainees, and it was an 18-month long program. They put you through the entire bank, from being a teller all the way to being a manager. So you had to learn different jobs. You were supervising people, you were managing people, you were managing facilities. So it gave you great experience. And then they would place you wherever the need was.
And they had a lot of branches, right?
National Bank of Alaska, when I was with them, had 36 branches statewide.
And did you visit many of them?
Yes, yes. I was very fortunate. As a management trainee, they would say, well, we need you in Juneau. The manager called and his assistant manager position is vacant, so you plug you in. So I went there and worked there for a while. Then, we need you in Seward. We need you in Homer. So you kind of sort of, went wherever, they would send you.
You got to know the communities, I'm sure, then. And I want to come back to that idea. But I'm also thinking each branch must have had its own dynamics, its own flavor, if you will.
Yeah, especially when you went really remote, like Metlakatla. And I still remember as my first day there in the branch, and they had the combinations to the vault taped to the door. I'd never seen anything like that. I'm like, this is really, So yeah, well, whoever robs us, can't really go that far. So we're not worried about that. Right. So yeah, you talk about different flavors, but it was a different mentality that existed. Smaller branches had no ID system, right? They just said, I don't have an ID, but Susie knows me. Susie, come over here. Tell her you know me. Yeah, I know her. I mean, it was just very, very different.
Sure.
From branch to branch.
Yeah. Well, and then I want to touch on this idea of knowing your community in a different way. When I talked with Steve Frank, who was also in banking, of course, it really came out how important banks are for every community in which, because they are the lifeblood for new ventures. So you get to see a side of people and your community that most people don't get to see.
Yeah.
Was that your experience too,
Absolutely.
Joe? Yeah.
Absolutely. We are there to serve a need, and the need of the community, whether it's a business community or it's the individuals in that community. We help young kids start a savings account. Moms bring their kids and say, let's teach them about saving money. Then we help people buy their homes, buy their cars, start their new business, expand their business. I mean, it's. I often say we make dreams come true. We don't always have that privilege because not everyone can get what they're looking for a variety of reasons, So I can't say we have helped 100% of the people who ever came to us, but we came pretty darn close to it. And you establish relationships, you establish that connection. That's a lifelong connection, and I'm very proud of my time in this industry because we've helped so many people and shaped the community, whether even like nonprofits, how people in our bank, they have supported nonprofits not just by making a donation, but actually volunteering with them and spending time with them. So yeah, the community bank aspect is just pretty close to our hearts.
What made it a goal for you to get your MBA, your Master of Business Administration? What were you thinking, and you came back here?
Yes.
How did that? Tell me about that process, Joe.
I was in Juneau, and I had been there 6 months, and they were thinking about offering me a permanent position there as an assistant manager. And I know that my dad really wanted me to get my MBA too. So he said, can you do it from there? I couldn't do it from there. And so I ended up talking to Dean Phillips to get his advice, you know. He says, well, you can come back home. And I said, okay, I will.
What a lovely way to put that.
Yeah. So I came back home. And it was night program. So all the classes for masters in business administration were held in the evenings. So all day long I didn't really have anything, but I can work. So that's what I did. I worked all day and went to school at night. Yeah. And it's a wonderful program.
So you get your MBA. Where did you decide to stay in banking, and what was the state of banking? We haven't talked about this aspect of our state, but banks and financial situations rise and fall.
Yep.
Like everywhere. Where was banking when you got out with your MBA, and what did you decide to do?
So I was working the entire time, from the time I graduated with an undergraduate degree and till after I got my MBA. And then, I mean, I never had a break in working to go to school full time. That, you know, I was going to school full time, but that was in the evenings, you know. And so that was 80s. The banking scene was different in the 80s here. There's a lot of people unable to take care of their obligations, their responsibilities. You know, real estate plunged. People were coming into the bank and throwing their car keys on the desk and saying, you know, you can have it. Motor homes, trailers. I mean, it was kind of
Yeah.
going downhill.
Yeah. It was a serious issue.
Yeah, it was. I was with Alaska National Bank of the North at that time, and that bank was struggling, and you could see the writing on the wall that, you know, its trajectory is kind of going south. And I thought to myself that, well, I could stay here, or I could just go find another job. And I thought, well, let me go find another job. And I applied for a job at Alaska USA as a loan officer, and got interviewed, and then they offered me the branch manager position because they thought that, well, I was possibly slightly overqualified for a loan officer. I said, okay.
You think?
It sounds good to me, you know.
So I have to ask you a story about banking. So you get this opportunity to start a bank, but as I hear tell, Denali State Bank started in a garage.
It did. A lot of our initial organizational meetings were in Gary Roth's garage because we didn't have a place. We didn't have a bank. We didn't have a building. We were just in organizational mode. So all of our organizational meetings were in his garage. And there were like only 2 of us first, and then another person joined. So 3 of us, and then, you know, later we hired another person, so 4 of us. So this wasn't like a huge group of people that had, you know, come together. But it was just an amazing experience to be a part of a startup. People ask me, was it difficult to start a bank? And I said, no, not at all. It was really a lot of fun.
It must be exciting, though.
It was very exciting.
Yeah.
You know, I used to say that suddenly I found myself to be doing things I had never imagined I would do, you know, and it was all because we had to do it. We're starting a bank. So it's, you know, the carpet, the teller line, the colors, the pencils, the rubber bands, the data processing system, the people, the policies, the typewriters. And, you know, we did have typewriters back then. It was just like you became jack of all trades. And everything had to be done just by a very few people so that we could open the doors on time. We were applying to open a bank in 1985, tail end of 1985, and that is when a lot of the banks were closing.
Yeah, they sure were.
So there was this sentiment like, what are these guys doing? The banks are closing and they want to open a bank. And our thought process was, this is the perfect time to open a bank because, you know, we start fresh. You know, we are not carrying the baggage. We don't have the problems of the other banks. We're starting a brand new bank.
You know, and you don't think about this, but each bank must occupy a niche in itself too.
Sure.
And so a local bank obviously is a much different entity for a community than, say, a national chain is.
Yes.
And they bring different strengths to bear. And I guess that intimacy with your community is a strong suit.
Well, the premise behind opening the bank was there was some basic foundational values that we embraced, that it had to be local, it had to be based here, where nobody had to go call 1-800 something somewhere outside to get a decision. All the decisions were made locally. You could walk in any time, talk to anybody from the president to down. And there was accessibility. We treated our customers like royalty. You know, we bent over backwards to take care of our customers, and we got to know them. So that was the whole piece is, we're not going to say to you, now, who are you? Prove yourself to me. Show me this, show me that, 2 pieces of ID, none of that. We wanted the whole banking experience, which had become so negative, to actually just flip around and be this place where people felt welcome, you know. And we loved it. We trained our people that way, and those principles still stand. So we've had 3 presidents in the bank. I was the second one, and now we are with Steve Lundgren, who's the 3rd president. Outstanding customer service, local decisions, community involvement, all of those principles still continue to be practiced and practiced really well. So that was our niche.
Okay, you talk about that transition, the 3 presidents. Were you aware, Joe, that you were making history when you became the president and CEO? Tell me about that,
No.
because as we mentioned earlier, you're the first banking president and CEO that's a woman in Alaska history.
Yeah. I was pretty much towards the tail end of Gary's tenure running the bank. So for me, it wasn't a huge difference of, you know, suddenly being titled the president. And I thought much was being made of that. You know, for me, I'm still rolling out of bed the same way. Nothing has changed in my life. Still taking care of 2 kids. Still putting my pants one leg at a time. So
Oh, that's how you do it.
what
Darn.
has changed, So I felt maybe some level of discomfort at times, that too much is being made of this, I'm just doing my job, which I absolutely love, So, but no, I wasn't aware that this would make history. We didn't do anything to push that concept forward. It started being mentioned, and then, well, you're still mentioning it. So it's just something that I was quite perplexed about for a very long time. That what's the big deal, because it's a job. It's a great
Yeah.
job.
Yeah. Well, okay. So, but the reason we're still mentioning it, I think it was back in 2008, the UAF College of Business and Security was not that title then, but they acknowledge you as Business Leader of the Year.
Yeah.
So you did break some glass ceilings. You did stand out, and you obviously made an impression, Joe. And so, saying that, when you retire, you still are very much part of the community, and people are inviting you to serve on boards, including the Board of Regents here at the University of Alaska. And your good friend Jake Poole, I guess, says you'd be a great candidate. Tell me about serving outside of being the president and CEO, what your board work, especially at the university level, does.
My fondness for UAF had always been there. My mom worked here for 36 years. My husband is an alum. I'm an alum. My sister went here, and brother, both alums. My son is an alum. So this is a huge family connection for us, this University of Alaska, Fairbanks. I've always been supportive. We started a scholarship in my dad's name to honor his work in the field of social work. We fully endowed it. It's doing exactly what it's supposed to do, give some scholarship money to students who are interested in social work and social sciences. So we're very strongly supportive of the university. So I was always engaged with the university. In 2008, when they advised me that I was chosen as the Business Leader of the Year, it actually was heartwarming to me, because I was a graduate of School of Management, and I felt, I felt humbled by that recognition from my school, and I think at one point I thought, God, what a great decision to switch majors, because would this have happened when I was a biology major? I don't know, So that was really great, but it gives alums and graduates of this university an opportunity to give back. And by being chosen as Business Leader of the Year, yes, it's a wonderful recognition. I have a nice plaque that's sitting in my home. It also gave me an opportunity to now generate funds for this university, for the school, because that event is a fundraiser, right? And so everybody that's before me and subsequent to me knows that this isn't about them. It's about the students. It's about raising funds for the university and for the school. It was a wonderful event.
But not to just skate over your tenure on the Board of Regents. Again, just like banking has its ups and downs, university funding and the challenges facing the school as a whole, the UA system, goes through ups and downs, and you're part of that.
Yeah, and I remember you asking me about my name being forwarded by Jake Poole.
Yeah.
And we kind of went past that a little bit. But I remember being at a social event, and Jake came over to me and talked to me about being nominated for Board of Regents. And he says, do you know anything about that? I said, no. He says, what do you think? I said, nothing to think. I mean, I don't know. So he says, we would really like it if you would consider it. And I, as I have mentioned to you before, when you're cornered in a room by 2-3 people, you know that this isn't
Going away.
This is not going away. You better just say yes.
Yeah.
And I did, and I said yes. Sounds good to me. And then my name was forwarded to Governor Sean Parnell, and he appointed myself and Mike Powers, who was the president CEO of our hospital. So we were both appointed at the same time to the Board of Regents position. 2011 to 2018, so it was an 8-year term. And I was told by the governor's board and commission person that we have like half a dozen meetings. It's not a big deal, Joe, it's, yeah.
It's called bait and switch, I think.
Yeah, you're an oversight group, and you meet 6 times a year, different. It's actually, cool. It's fun. No, I it was never that way. When we started, both Mike and I started on the Board of Regents together, we used to look at each other and say, this is not what we were told,
Yeah.
University is, as almost everybody hopefully recognizes, is a very large and very complex organization.
Mm-hmm.
My knowledge was only of UAF, right? I did not know anything outside of UAF. So it's a steep learning curve, because suddenly, as a regent, you have to become familiar with 2 other campuses, Anchorage and Juneau, and then about 16 smaller community campuses. And they're all part of the system. And I may know every 5th or 6th person at UAF campus. I know nobody outside of here. So then you get to be exposed, I guess, to the workings of the university, the complexity of it, the budgeting challenges, programming challenges, student challenges, faculty challenges. And no, it's not an easy job. And I realize why it takes an 8-year appointment, because the first year or 2 you're just going,
Catch up.
wow,
Just,
yeah, there's a lot coming at you. It was difficult times at the university when I was on the regent.
Yeah.
Budgetary challenges, almost like 100% leadership turnover from the president to the chancellors. Title IX. One of the regents prior to my coming on board was Cynthia Henry. And Cynthia and I always used to laugh, and she says, how are you doing, Joe? I said, I'm not having as good a time as you were having. I'm having a different life. And in her time, the money was just coming in. So much money. You had new buildings, new programs, whatever you wanted. We were ribbon cutting, we were, breaking ground for a new building. That was not our experience. We were actually shutting down,
Yeah.
eliminating, cutting.
Couldn't open buildings that had been built
Yes.
because you didn't have the funding.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. So completely different challenges. Title IX became really huge during my tenure. I think people don't realize how complex this organization is.
That's right. Yeah. Well, let's then pull away. Your dad's health suffers. You decide to leave the Board of Regents so you could care for him and focus on your family. But you also, more recently, decide to occupy your time with a completely new venture, something you've never done before, and you become a podcaster.
It sounds
It sounds great, doesn't it?
amazing,
Yeah. Yeah. But it's a very challenging thing. You knew nothing about what it was.
No.
Tell me about that, because Joe's Table Alaska is now up and running. People can go on the website and find it. And you have 6 episodes now under your belt?
I have 8.
8. So you're cranking them out, as we say in the business here, Joe. Tell me, what made you think of being a podcaster?
Well, actually, again, it wasn't something that just was on my bucket list to do, that I wanted to do this. When I finished my term with the Board of Regents, that was the year my dad passed away. So I ended Board of Regents term in 2018. I didn't leave early, but I finished my term, and my dad passed away that year in December. And I had a plate full of things to take care of after his passing. Take care of my mom, take care of his financial affairs, his estate, everything. It took me so much time to do all of that. So I didn't really have time to devote to anything other than that. I believe it was mostly during COVID that when we are all at home and not doing much and thinking about, okay, what can we do? I just felt like I needed to do something just dramatically different than what I have been doing for the last 30 years, which is being in business, being in finance, being in the banking. I wanted to do something so different. And the idea was percolating in my head that I should do something with food. And most of my friends who know me were thinking, yes, you should, write a cookbook, or you should teach classes, which I had been teaching classes. Yeah. But I really didn't. I wanted to do something more substantive, maybe something that what my dad would do, Who can I serve? Who's the underserved that I can serve? And I'm not saying that I am serving the underserved, but just wandering through the farmer's market and talking to the people who bring all that produce to our table got me thinking that these people have a story. They work very hard in a very short season to grow what they can. I don't know if they make any money. What do they do? What are their challenges? What are their stories? And I wanted to tell their stories and maybe promote them, because nobody talks about this. Nobody talks about farms and farming. And I said, well, I can create a website and do that. But I knew that their stories were important enough that they needed to be heard. And the vehicle for that was podcasting. And I reached out to who I would consider is the eminent authority on podcasting, and that's the great Robert Hannon. And I said, help me.
Go on with you.
Help me.
Well, you're a natural conversationalist. I mean, you're really good at drawing out your subjects. And here's something that comes to mind when I think about your podcast, because it wasn't on my radar, but food security.
Well, the challenge is in our geography, right? Where we live. So we have good 100, maybe 110 days of growing season. And you can grow a lot because, got all the sun. But then what do you do? So storage is an issue, and that's the problem, that all of the farmers cannot produce as much as they would like to because they don't have then a way to store their products, the greens.
Well, what I'm so impressed about your podcast is, though, you touch on a lot of different. You talk about those entrepreneurial people. You talk with Tommy G and his shop selling meats, but also Sam and Ann from the food bank. And all of this really represents local efforts to meet needs that I would never have even thought of.
Yeah.
So it really is a remarkable. Well, I guess finally, when you tire of podcasting, what are you going to do, Joe? Because you seem indomitable that way.
I like staying busy because, Robert, I really don't have any talents. When people retire and they say, we're going to, get a motorhome and go do X, Y, and Z, that's not me. That's not Steve. And, well, maybe I'll quilt. I don't know how to quilt. Maybe I'll crochet. Maybe I'll take up art. All of that, those talents have escaped me, and I'm no good at any of that. So I do know that I want to stay busy, and I want to stay connected to people, because that really is who I'm all about. And I want to advocate for the people engaged in food security and agricultural enterprises as best as I can, because I think my dad would be proud of me doing that. He was a social worker, and I'm a social worker's daughter, and I just want to continue doing as much as I can to serve. And that's how it's going to be till, I guess, somebody kicks me out.
Well, Joe Heckman, thank you so much for talking with me today.
Thank you, Robert.
Remarkable woman. Come on up. I'm going to hand this over to you. And theoretically, I should have a microphone here. And have a seat, and we'll take some questions from the audience. But I know we didn't talk quite as much as you wanted to about your family. So tell us a little bit more about what, besides interviewing Steve, and we'll hold that in the future.
Well, the interview that I did of Steve is such a great piece because it becomes family history. So our boys and then their families, will have, a recording of, their father's, journey, and so I'm very, very proud of that. Very proud of my two boys. Being as busy as I was and how I managed to raise such two good kids is a puzzle, but I think because they were good kids, and it was just a joy, to raise them. They both are in Fairbanks now, so I'm very happy. Now we can have meals together, so I think that's what you were thinking of. Proud of both of them and their accomplishments. Can't believe they're in their 30s, which makes me feel like I'm very old, but I think that's what you were looking for.
Well, let's open up questions, because I know a lot of people from your past are here and you're present. Does anyone have a question for Joe? Well, while they're getting their courage up, let me ask you about the other F word, food. I know you teach cooking classes. I've been lucky enough to attend and be one of your pupils. Do you plan on doing more of that?
I do like teaching, and I do it through the Summer Arts Festival, and I've done it through the Summer Sessions program. Michelle has asked me to host classes in my home, and it was really fun to have, you know, a small group in my home. And the conversation is great, and you know, we're helping each other, and hopefully everybody is walking away with some knowledge of good food and eating good food. So
Eating good food.
yeah, so
Yeah.
Robert was one of the attendees. I would like to do more of that. I think the space becomes a challenge this year. We had problems with the hutch, you know, the kitchens. Something is happening there, some boiler repair or something, so there's no culinary classes at Hutch this year. So hopefully when we get back next year, my sous chef, Tammy Tragus, and I will continue to offer some classes there.
That's wonderful. Okay, Percy?
Did you, maybe I missed it, but did you have very much further contact back in India with all your family that's back there?
Yes, and I go often. Both my grandparents is who I grew up with pretty much. So I was very close to my grandfather and grandmothers. Today, the last time I was there was 2019. My couple aunts are still there and my cousins. So my extended family is there. My immediate family is all in US. I love going to India. It just is such a different country. I arrived there and I have tears in my eyes because I'm just like, I was there for 17 years growing up. And then when I leave there, I say, okay, I cannot live here, you know. I'm going back home to Alaska because it is very crowded, very busy. There's a lot going on, and I'm just so happy to come back to Fairbanks. This is home. This has been home for now 49 years. Yeah. Yeah.
That's wonderful.
So, but I do, yeah, I do keep in touch with my extended family.
Come on, somebody else has got to have a question.
Joe, I have a question. In banking, as a woman, what were the challenges? Because you painted this beautiful picture that it was just so smooth, but I can't believe that the whole road was smooth.
Well, as a woman in that industry, you pretty much started at the bottom, and I had no trouble with that. You know, so with the management trainee program, it maybe gave me a little bit of an edge. But, you know, you just, I was given a different job and I said, sure, sounds good. Now, you know, we're going to have you do this. Sure, sounds good. But that's my temperament. That's my personality. I believe that in accepting all these new responsibilities that I was learning a lot. And I think at some level I also understood that I was making myself quite indispensable because I was, you know, just everybody came to me for everything, you know. But that knowledge is something that, you know, I would tell people in my bank, regardless of gender, that you have to keep learning. Keep learning, keep asking questions, keep accepting responsibilities, because that's what's going to get you ahead. In my experience, hard work is more important than anything else, you know. And so as a woman, starting in the industry that was all men, mostly men, all the loan officers were men. Their support staff was women, but the officers were all men. You know, you just kind of understood that it's going to take a while, you know, for the women to get to the stage where they are treated as equal. I don't think there is still that balance, but there is huge progress. There is a lot of very senior women holding senior leadership positions in banks, not just in Alaska, but also in the country. I didn't, and I'm going to say something and you're going to think I'm being kind of facetious, but I didn't think that was fair that men didn't get to wear pantyhose. That was a challenge.
How do you know they don't?
So we were very like properly dressed, and there were dress rules and all of that. I think because my background is we were raised to respect authority. We were raised to respect our elders, and so if somebody told us to do something, we did it. But Michelle, really, it was for me just such a joyful journey. Every step of the way, especially after I started Denali State Bank with Gary Roth. It was just like, it was a place where I wanted to go every morning. I rolled out of bed and I was eager to get to work. And our kids spent a lot of time at the bank because their mother was there all the time. Yeah, it was actually, I can't tell you that there might have been one or two incidences where after Gary retired and I was sitting in his office and a customer came in looking for the president and saw me sitting there and backed out because they thought they were in the wrong office. You kind of deal with that, in a kind of a kind, fun way, and people are okay with that. But so some of that, the perception of people that the president of the bank should be a man, it didn't last too long. I think if it was there, it went away. I was at that bank for 28 years. So yeah.
I saw a couple of hands back there.
Well, my question was going to be about jokes I thought about women in banking, but I think we really covered that. So a personal question. I was listening to your presentation trying to see where you met Steve.
Oh.
Fairbanks, where were you?
I met Steve in Fairbanks. At the bank. I was working for Alaska National Bank of the North, and I was an operations officer, and my job was, among many other jobs, was to accept subpoenas and requests for records and things like that. And Steve had walked in. He was working for an embezzlement case, I believe, and he wanted some bank records, and so he brought them to me, and that's how we met. Then I think I chased after him. At least that's what he would say. But yeah, we met at a bank. Joe Cookley.
So what was the connection with Gary Roth? What was the transition from Alaska National Bank of the North to Denali? How did that happen?
Gary Roth was a commercial loan officer, a senior vice president at Alaska National Bank of the North. I'd never worked for him or with him. I worked as a branch manager at another branch of Alaska National Bank of the North, but we knew of each other. He is the one who worked with some of the investors and wanted to start a bank, a local bank. And so as he is doing a dual job, he's raising capital, to start a bank, getting investors to invest in the startup of a bank, and then he's also looking for people. So he comes over to Alaska, USA, where I was working, and takes me out to lunch. And he says, I'm starting a bank. And I said, okay. And he spins the story of this wonderful bank where service is going to be the best, and it's all local, everything is local, and would I consider joining him at the ground level? And I said, I'll think about it. So I went home and thought about it, and then next morning I said I'm interested and put that note in his mailbox. He lived in Aurora, so I guess I knew that somehow, but I put it in his mailbox, and he called me right away, and he says, Joe, there is no bank right now. And he says, so don't be hasty in making this decision. And I said, okay, so if there is no bank, what are you going to do? And he says, I'm going to be in an unemployment line. And I said, I'll be right behind you. And I quit my job, told Steve, and Steve says, please tell me you have another job. And we started organizing Denali State Bank. So that was the connection. So he became our first president. So he handled one half of the bank, which was, lending and, predominantly lending because he was so good at it. And I handled the rest of it, which was everything, and it was a great experience.
I love the story about the building and his vision of the building and what you saw before you.
Yeah, he took me to the bank. So there was another group of investors who invested in the old St. Joseph's Hospital, and that is where we were going to lease the ground floor and the basement to start our bank. And he wanted me to see that. And I remember seeing the old St. Joseph's Hospital. Well, I was here since '75, and we were doing all of this in '85. So I've seen that empty shell sitting there for so long, this concrete structure. And so all this work was going on, and he wanted me to see it. So he took me, and we went down to the basement, and he's walking through, and he's saying, this is going to be the mortgage department, this is going to be the installment lending, this is going to be the data processing center. And I thought the guy was just nuts, because we are wearing galoshes, because it's just mud and guck and everything. There is no definition of anything. It's just a basement full of mud. And he's just had the vision. He could see clearly how this thing was going to shape up. And he could spin a story.
Yeah.
Joe, you had a follow-up.
How long was the transition from when you quit your job to the time when the bank opened?
I gave Alaska USA, and it's interesting because Steve Lundgren was my boss then. Then I hired him and became his boss. So, kind of like a soap opera as the world turns, in banking. I gave him 2 weeks because that's all I was required to give. And I was really anxious to start whatever it is that we were going to do, So Gary had already quit his job in the summer because he needed to, beat feet and get some money raised. And I got hired in November of 1985. And we opened the bank in February of '86. So in a very compact time frame, we did a lot of work, and the building was being built at the same time. We were the first tenants, and we leased the main floor and the basement, and then eventually we bought the building so that, we could have more space, but, we still have actually tenants, in the building that have been there a long time. So, Don.
Yes. When you first arrived in Fairbanks, you were 17, 18 years old. And was this the first time, I don't know, when you first came to America, but did you think of Fairbanks as a typical American town? It had a Safeway, it had a J.C. Penney's, it had a Woolworths. Was that
Well, I had actually...
It had a Nordstrom's.
It had a Nordstrom's, yeah. This was the first city in America that I came to, was Fairbanks. And as I mentioned in my interview, we all really were hung up that we're going to Boston. And so we'd done a lot of research in Boston, but that's not where we ended up. We didn't know what to think of Fairbanks. We thought that it was pretty rural compared to where we were raised and what was going on. But my dad was just spot on, it's the people. you know. We arrived here July 4th of 1975. I started college in August, end of August of that year, and I could see that this is what Dad likes about this place. It's just the people were so wonderful, you know. And the friends that I made in my freshman year of college are still my friends, you know. So it's just been a great place to be. Yeah. Hi.
Is it common for 17-year-olds to be well versed in English where you came from?
We were, my siblings and I were, because it was important for my father that we were bilingual and that our method of instruction as we were growing up was in English, not in our native language. I think even then he thought that one day I'll be somewhere else and English will become important. So from kindergarten and on, I could speak English fluently. We were not allowed to speak English at home because my grandmother didn't like it. But in school it was English, at home it was Hindi, and we just flew in and out of both the languages very, very easily. Yeah.
One more question, I think.
Do your boys speak Hindi?
No, I'm a failure as a mother there.
I would not say that.
No, it's something that I regret, that had I been speaking with them from when they were very, very young, they would be very fluent.
They
But
only know naughty words.
but everybody in my house, like my dad, my mom, my siblings, we were all constantly talking in English. So there wasn't. So I spoke with my mother in Hindi, and then when I went back to India, I would speak to everybody in Hindi, but I never taught my boys, you know. Maybe a few bad words, you know, but.
Well, there's a reception out there, and I know you'll have a chance to talk with Joe. Please, Joe Heckman.
No.